Welcome to Conscious Evolution Media Productions, coming to you live from our Denver, Colorado studios. And we are also streaming, of course, live on consciousevolutionmedia.com. And I'm your host and moderator, Coach Steve Toth. And our theme today is one of my most favorite subjects, UFOs and aliens, and disclosures and the lack of disclosures. And our guest today is Dr. I want to say Simone, but it's Simeon, right?
Simeon, right.
Simeon Hein, and he's an author, and he's followed by, what, 1 million people almost on YouTube?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that? Yeah, I thought I mentioned that. Sure. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here again.
Yeah, and I'm having just a hard time keeping myself in my skin because you just came back from the UFO. There was a whole week of seminars about UFOs, and tell us a little bit about the organization. It's in Arizona, right?
Yeah, it's called the Open Minds TV group, I believe. They've devoted themselves to looking at issues related to UFOs, extraterrestrial encounters, government cover-ups, related subjects, and they run a conference every year, the UFO Congress, and it's for, about a week, something like that. There's a lot of guest
How many people show up?
Oh, hundreds and hundreds.
Right.
I think it's actually getting so big now they're going to be moving it because they're running out of space. It was in Scottsdale.
To Las Vegas, so that can have 10,000 people?
Something like that. You know, it used to be in Laughlin in the past, and they're running it now. And we have a lot of speakers, a lot of credible speakers. It's a lot of fun. You get to interact with people and talk and really open up about this subject and let's find out what's going on.
So what is the coolest thing that you heard there?
I'll tell you what really blew me away. There was a guy there named Richard Hoover, who's a career NASA astrobiologist. He's never been to a UFO conference before, but he came to tell us that NASA already has proof of extraterrestrial life. They've had it since the 70s. And basically, for a variety of reasons, which no one's exactly sure of, NASA doesn't want to tell us that they found fossils on Mars. He showed us the photos. And especially in the so-called carbonaceous meteorites that fall to Earth, not every single meteorite, but the carbon-based ones, guess what they find in these meteorites when they crack them open? Bacteria, blue-green
organisms.
Algae. They were alive at one time. They're not alive anymore. Fossils. Diatoms, which are small organisms.
Yeah.
And he said, there's already proof of extraterrestrial life. It's this small bacterial single-cell life or larger organisms. And NASA doesn't want us to know about it.
Well, what I heard is that the way we know NASA, like how they want us to know them, is just a cover-up. The real purpose is really to communicate with aliens and UFOs, and also to work on the technology.
I don't have any evidence for that directly. I mean, that's a possibility.
I just heard that.
But we do know that they don't like this line of research that Richard Hoover, again, this guy is a career, he's 250 published papers, 12 patents according to research. Spent a couple of days with him. And he is really incensed that you have data. He said anybody that looked at this particular fossil that the Opportunity rover found in 2004 on Mars, anyone is going to say this is a crinoid. He says there's no question about it. 100% certainty this is a crinoid. What did NASA do? Within 3.5 hours, they made a decision to destroy it with their rock abrasion tool. He said, now why would you do that? If you just found something that's proof of life in the past on Mars, why would you destroy it? They don't want us talking about it yet. He feels it actually came from even higher up than NASA to do that. But they're looking at it right now. Look who actually ordered that fossil to be destroyed. You'd think that we'd be excited about it. It'd be something on the news. Except it's, in this case, it's covered up. So there is a cover-up.
There's nothing on the news, really.
Not about this subject. Not about this subject. And this is why you have to have conferences like the UFO Congress and so forth, is to get people like that, and we can all talk about this and find out exactly what's been going on. So now we find out that NASA, it's not just NASA. I'm a little bit shocked to find out that a magazine I read regularly, Science Magazine, I've been subscribed to it for over 20 years, member of the AAAS, they wouldn't even cover this topic. He published this paper in the Journal of Cosmology finding diatoms, bacteria, fossilized in these meteorites that fall to Earth, right? They won't even cover the topic. Nature won't cover it. And he got a lot of flack even for publishing it in the peer-reviewed Journal of Cosmology. Why? Well, we know there's no life outside of Earth, so why bother to even look for it? They say it's contamination, that the humans that opened the meteorites, put these bacteria there. Some of these bacteria are extinct on Earth. It's a little hard to believe that if they're extinct on Earth, they somehow got from a human hand into a meteorite. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
Well, how ignorant do they think we are? I mean, I heard data that we have something like 500 quadrillion planets in the universe.
It's a big number.
That's a big number.
Whatever it is.
I don't know. I don't even know how to. I don't even know if I can show that on my calculator. But it's I don't know where I read that, but I read that somewhere.
It's growing by the day.
So that's a huge number, and
growing by the day. Yeah.
And how would we think that we're the only life form?
I don't know how you get into that one.
That.
You know,
and are we like off limits to them or something?
No.
Because how come they not finding us, or have they
I think
already
they
found
are finding us. I think. I mean, this is I think what people are seeing on a daily basis around the Earth that we haven't seen for the past 100 years. You know, obviously this is a very large and a sensitive topic to many people, but I think that they have discovered us. It's a question of whether we're actually willing to have a collective discussion to talk about that. We're finding something, but we know that if we're, without a doubt, at least I'm convinced seeing this presentation, that we have found extraterrestrial life in bacterial form. Now, where do you go from there? You're bringing up the fact that there are lots of so-called exoplanets, planets that could sustain life. You remember like 10 years ago they thought they had found like 100 somewhere around the Milky Way. The latest count is something what you're talking about, I believe 40 million from...
No, I said quadrillion.
Maybe that.
Whatever that is.
I don't know what you're talking the last one I read in the Milky Way, I believe it was millions of possible planets just in our own Milky Way alone. That could support life. The ones that are our size and the same distance from their sun. So it's growing daily. The telescopes that are out there that can detect these little planets through looking at gravitational shifts and so forth are finding more and more every day.
Yeah. So did you hear any talks at the conference about our government? Are they like meeting with aliens on a regular basis? Is there a conversation that has been going on? Are they advising our government about how to use technology, what to do, how to evolve?
Steve, the answer to that is we don't know for certain, because there are people that claim this, and even people that have worked in the military or in intelligence agencies that have come forward to make such statements. But we don't have any proof, in my view, that this has actually happened. And there's a lot of debate about this. The real debate at the Congress was, is there a government cover-up, or is the government as perplexed as the rest of us? There's no doubt that the UFO phenomena exists. People have been seeing these objects for a long time. In Phoenix, in '97, a craft a mile wide was seen by thousands and thousands of people. I was lucky enough to talk to some of these people that had seen it at the conference, several of them. They said it blotted out stars. The governor of the state, Governor Fife Symington, who originally made fun of it, later came out and said, oh, no, I saw it too, and I was in the National Air Guard. We don't have anything like that. That had to be extraterrestrial. And you would think there'd be some sort of news coverage when a governor of a state said, I actually covered it up because I was afraid of panic. But there was a huge triangular craft over the skies of Arizona. It was seen all the way through Arizona. Now, the real question is, does our government, the U.S. government in this case, know a lot about this subject? Are they meeting with extraterrestrials? What do they know? What don't they know? We don't know yet, because the government hasn't really come forward to tell us anything other than the fact that we had on the We the People site, on the Obama website, the White House website, they denied any knowledge of the phenomenon. Also, the government has no evidence of it, which is just impossible, given all the reports you can find from the State Department and intelligence agencies going back to the 50s. So the fact is, Steve, we don't really know what they know. They're not telling us, and I think we'd all be in a lot better situation if they would just come forward and we could actually kind of make some headway on this topic.
Yeah, I agree. Have you heard anything at the conference about other countries, like I'm thinking of South America and maybe some of the European countries? Are they more open to, are the governments there more open to talk about this, and what effect will that have on what's going on here? Because eventually the word will come around, right?
Absolutely. I think they are more open about it. Let me just go back a couple months, about a year ago, to the citizen hearing in Washington, D.C. This was a mock congressional hearing we had. It was held by the citizen hearing foundation run by Stephen Bassett and others. And people can find out about that at citizenhearing.org. It's a movement to get Congress to hold hearings about this again, like they did, I believe, last time was 1968 under the auspices of Gerald Ford, then congressman, I believe, from Michigan. He had quite an interest in this subject. Well, we haven't had any hearings since then. That just lasted a day. These were 5 days. We had 5 retired Congress people and a senator, Senator Gravel from Alaska, hold a mock hearing. And to get to your question, there were 30 witnesses, several of them from Latin America, China, and other countries. And the fascinating thing to me was they're actually not holding the information back anymore from their people. In Latin America, we heard from Chile, Brazil, Uruguay. They actually have conferences where the military invites the public, shows them their pictures with their top-notch cameras, their gun camera footage. They go to the schools to educate the kids about the space people. And they tell them, we don't know exactly what this is, but you don't need to be afraid of it. And they're opening up to it. We had a representative, the highest-ranking UFO researcher in China, Mr. Swen Li, I believe his name was, and he told Dr. Swen Li, he told us that same thing in China. Now, the Congress folk and the senator wanted to know, are you going to hold disclosure hearings about this to basically say, we know that Britain, for example, has been releasing their files. The French have been releasing their files. China, other places. They all said we're waiting for the United States government to do this because we don't really want to become enemies with the U.S. government over this issue. So it seems like a lot of countries are waiting for us to actually move forward on this issue. But I really feel sometimes like we're behind the Iron Curtain now. In the Cold War, it used to be the Soviet Union, which was the one that withheld the information, created censorship. You know about this because you're from Hungary.
I used to live there.
So you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But I feel like with respect to this subject, it's not getting.
I'm feeling that the U.S. government is becoming like the type of life that I was living for 19 years.
Unfortunately,
I'm seeing it unfold in front of me, and it's like what's interesting that you mentioned this is that our government is now listening to all the foreign governments and the head of foreign governments and their telephones and.
Yeah, that's what we're finding out from these leaks, right?
And they are upset about it, but we're the United States, right?
Yeah, we're supposed to be doing that for particular reasons. What we're learning from these documents is they're just spying on economic competitors, the president of Mexico and Brazil, Angela Merkel, all our friends, and maybe as Obama said, this is par for the course, but really this isn't the real legitimate reason for doing that type of intelligence work. But here's the thing, Steve, to get back to your question. It seems like the other countries are moving forward, and what I'm wondering is whether this sort of disclosure, when it does happen, is it going to come from another country where you're going to have a sighting, lots of people are going to have it on their cell phone cameras, and the government and people are just going to come out and talk about it? Because the situation I see here in the U.S. is we still see the media and a lot of other organizations marginalizing the subject, making fun of people who have had these sightings. I don't know why you can make fun of tens of thousands of people that saw a huge triangular craft, but they actually accuse them of having mental illness or something. This is something that we used to, this is how you marginalize people when you can't deal with the data. If you can't attack the science, you attack the person.
Yeah, right? and they make a joke out of it.
You make a joke, and I just don't think that's fair. I think this is an issue of respect and decency and ethics. When we have enough people having these experiences, sometimes en masse, the last thing you want to do is say, well, you were seeing flocks of geese reflected off Venus, through swamp gas. You don't have pilots who see these things when it's tracked on ground radar. It's got the radar records from the plane. They're picking something up. And we had a lot of qualified missile control launch officers who testified to us, 4 of them, that they were in their bunkers, which are in control of the missile silos in various locations out west in the U.S., when the missiles went down. Within a short period of time, 10 to 15, separate systems all would go down after the sighting of a flying disc.
Wow. Like interference type of thing?
Yeah, some sort of interference, which they couldn't explain. I can't see how you could accuse those people, like the Washington Post editorial did about the citizens' hearing. It suggested this was a type of schizotypal mental disorder. Don't you think they screen these people who have their fingers on the button pretty heavily with
You
the
would
Minnesota
think.
multiphasic personality?
Yeah, you would think.
Yeah, so this is not going to wash. This is kind of like the same thing they used to do to the Wright brothers or Thomas Edison. I mean, anyone who is saying we've got something new here, we have a tendency to make fun of. And I understand that people can be a little uncomfortable with it. But there's a point beyond which it seems to me it becomes very unhealthy. It's a form of denial. And if societies do that for too long, they stop growing.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a while. I agree with you. We are in huge denial. None of this is happening.
It's happening.
And it's good to have this conversation because I think that's really what's needed. So I'm curious, have you had any UFO experiences yourself besides the lights that we have on right now?
I really like this setup you have here, Steve. You know, this is really quite interesting. In fact,
we have fiber optics in here.
It looks like little tentacles coming down from the mothership.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm getting a message, Steve, from the Ashtar command. It's coming through. Well, I actually did.
Yeah. Sure.
Maybe this is why I was this isn't a topic I've studied forever. I only got interested as we talked on the other show we did a couple months ago about remote viewing. Let me just tell you how that got involved here before I tell you about my sightings.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I took this class in so-called remote viewing in '96 at the Planetary Institute back in Atlanta. As a skeptic, I heard about this. I thought, this can't be real. The average person doesn't. I don't have any psychic ability. I mean, maybe special people do. I almost went to the class almost thinking I would disprove it, only to find that I actually was drawing and describing pictures of targets that were hidden in the next room or out there. There's no way you could have gotten that without some other hidden channel of information that my conscious mind wasn't aware of. And everyone else in the class got results too.
Great.
I became a teacher there because I was considered someone that was somewhat good at actually doing this and teaching it.
I want to do your class, by the way, because I'm pretty sure that I would be pretty good at it.
It's a lot of fun.
Intuitive.
People tell me it's very life-changing to do this because most people aren't aware that they have this sort of ability. They may never have explored it. If you're an artist or musician, you'd be aware of that creative side of yourself, that side that seems to get information without the rational linear analysis. But everyone's got it to some degree. And this information seems to come through spontaneously. But there's a lot of research. Dean Radin and others have researched this. His latest book, Supernormal, goes into this. All the studies from the last 100 years, it shows conclusively that this ability exists, in my view, with all their meta-analysis, that they can show that this is real. But nonetheless, I came in contact with people who came there for training who had a lot of experience with UFOs and extraterrestrial phenomena. There were people there that had worked at NASA. There were people there who were astronauts, who had been astronauts in training. Maybe they never went on the mission, but they did the training and they got to talk to people at NASA. There were people there that had worked on the NASA films, transforming the 16-millimeter film onto videotape of the moon that the public never saw. And these people would say, you know, when I looked at that film, I could see structures and buildings, things from another time that were there, ruins. Wow. And people began to tell me about the different types of programs that existed. I got in contact with a lot of people who had firsthand contact with this type of phenomena, eventually with the people in the military remote viewing unit who had their own sort of experience with this.
And they've been using it for a long time.
Been using this since the 70s in this government program. So that's how I kind of got in contact with it again, and I found that there were a lot of people that were telling me, you know, I don't have any doubt that this is real. They were completely confident this is a real phenomenon. Even people that had told me they had come in contact with actual extraterrestrials in government facilities. You know, it's kind of a shocker, given that you probably haven't heard this on the nightly news, and you have people who've spent their whole life in the government telling you they've had this sort of contact. I can't verify it. That's why I'd like to have congressional hearings or sometimes something like that, like the citizen hearing is suggesting, so we can find out what is going, is this really true or not? But to get back to my sighting, I was actually in the Everglades with my mom. She's a bird watcher. We went down to the Everglades once, great place to watch birds and see other types of wildlife. And I saw something that looked like the moon. And I said, Mom, look at the moon. It's over there. It looks kind of weird. And she knew the moon was back there. But I'm looking at this thing. It's in the sky. It's about the size of a full moon. It's green. And then eventually she looks up and she said, well, the moon's over there. So what is this? We have binoculars, so we're looking up at it. Now, at first, my mind says it has to be a cloud, but why would it be perfectly round and really green when everything else is white in the sky, you know, the clouds? I look at it with the binoculars, and there's this pattern of dots in it that look like a Z. Dot, 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 dot. Now, why would you have something that's a cloud, which is kind of amorphous, with something that looks like a structure in it, and then it just, from a completely stationary position, moved into a cloud? And then all the lights went out in the air. There was a blackout within a few minutes.
Wow. So that was a UFO seeing, a sightseeing for you?
It was definitely something that was unidentified, unexplainable, and I had to tell you, the feeling about it was quite different. It just didn't feel like it belonged there. It just felt weird and strange, and something I'd never seen before, and it didn't feel like anything that I could explain. Maybe that opened up my mind to being open to the topic.
Oh, wow. Was there anything that you noticed that was going on in your body? Anything with the frequency?
A feeling of being observed. I'd never had that feeling before. It just didn't feel like it fit. It looked like it was intelligently controlled, and I had this feeling of being observed at the time. We happened to go to one of those ranger talks that they have at national parks. The people we sat down next to had seen it too.
Wow.
And then we have the blackout. We went up and told the ranger who had given us the talk afterwards, and she goes, "Oh, sure, I'm sure that really happened." But we talked with people who had also, and there were more witnesses to this, so this wasn't, just us. And I guess after that, I sort of became interested, started reading books, Timothy Good and others, Above Top Secret, just as a curiosity. It wasn't until many years later in '96, again, having been through at graduate school, research methods, I really hadn't studied much about this topic. But then going into remote viewing, I learned that the remote viewing unit at Fort Meade had apparently unofficially viewed UFOs and phenomena like this for the government. Unofficially, they tell us.
Interesting.
And you came across people who had said,
off the record.
I had this experience. I kept coming across them more and more, and became like, there's a connection here between so-called remote viewing. I like to call it resonant viewing. I don't think it's a really remote anything. It's a perceptual, subtle perception of some signals that are here. But there was a connection between the phenomena. And here's another aspect of it, Steve, I think that the audience will find interesting, which is that people that have had contact experiences with whatever this phenomenon is.
Abductions, for example?
Abductions, as some people call it, interactions, whatever you would like to label it as, contactees, they used to be called in the 50s. Whatever this phenomenon is, whether they are extraterrestrial, these beings, or whether there's some aspect of the Earth that we don't understand, people seem to report, for lack of a better word, psychic experiences, maybe before the encounter happens, certainly sometimes afterwards they feel like they have abilities maybe they didn't have before. So this seems to me actually to be a natural phenomena that causes us to have an evolutionary response, which means it seems to expand our abilities, perceptions, and so forth.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, just in case if they are listening to us right now, who knows, maybe they here in the studio.
Yeah, they're right there.
They wouldn't have to do an abduction with me because I would be completely willing, to go and have an experience. And I've heard lots of stories where people really didn't need to be abducted because they were willing to have the experience. I heard several stories like that, which are very interesting. I also heard some stories, and I want to know if you can back any of this up, that on this Earth, the Earth is what, 70-some% water, right? And we don't do a lot of work on the water, it seems, in comparison to everything else that we do as quote unquote humanity. It's almost like we are ignoring what's on the water. And is it possible that that's where a lot of the aliens are living currently, and that's why we're ignoring it?
Well, we've heard these reports for many years, especially coming from the Russians, about these undersea, unidentified submersible objects. If you do your research online, you'll find there's a lot of folks from the Navy that have seen these emerge from the ocean, hover over their aircraft carriers, and so forth, and many cases of this. There's a famous case from 1967, so-called Shag Harbor incident in, I believe, Nova Scotia. These objects were seen underwater. Something crashed, and these objects moved underwater, appeared to crash. It actually, probably deliberately going there, stayed underwater for several days. U.S. warships moved over them, even drew in some Soviet warships. They were quite interested in it also. So there is this connection between this phenomenon and the water. Now, whether that's why we haven't explored it, there's a lot of challenges going underwater and a lot of pressure and so forth. We've heard these reports over the years that there's a lot of this activity underwater too. and that these objects can be seen underwater. And I think this is, again, another aspect that we should be studying. We should be open about this, and we should find out if this is true or not.
Great.
I'm open to it, Steve.
All right, great. Now, I know that one of your passions is, just from the conversation we had last time, is, and we didn't have really much time because it came up at the end of the show, about crop circles. That's one of the things that you love and you love to do. And I'm wondering, how are crop circles connected to this conversation of aliens and UFOs? And I know you do tours, you take people to different places. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, you know, there really is this connection because the earliest crop circles that we know about, not all of them, but many of them are associated with these flying discs. I've talked to farmers who had this happen a while back, not recently, but a while back. There were the so-called Tully saucer nests in Australia, which inspired Doug and Dave, the so-called two guys from the pub, who made a lot of them, I'm convinced, in England in the in the 80s.
So a lot of these, is that what I'm hearing, that a lot of the crop circles are made by humans?
Well, now they are. I'm convinced they are, having spent many years over there. I got to know a lot of the circle makers. And that's the real interesting part about it. It seems to have been inspired by this UFO phenomenon for whatever reason. There seem to be trace cases where you have UFOs landing and leaving marks in crops or marks in the wheat, swirls sometimes. I just talked to a woman in North Idaho just a couple months ago who had this experience in the 70s picking huckleberries over in Washington State. And she told me they were picking these huckleberries, and all of a sudden what she described as a flying tortoiseshell, she said, you know, it had a bottom and a top with lights around it, started hovering, and people there panicked, went down, called the sheriff. The military comes up an hour later, tells everyone to leave. What they noticed before they left is where the craft had moved, all of the grass was flattened. Wow. And this is what we heard. So there's no doubt that the flying saucer phenomena is connected with crop circles and effects in grain crops and so forth. But the real connection is people that saw that started imitating it from my research and creating those sorts of patterns. And it seems like the whole crop circle phenomena is almost, it could be, I'm going to just throw this out there, I can't prove this, almost like an extraterrestrial training project to get humans to make more mathematically complicated shapes on a large scale, to go out to nature and play with it, play with the shapes, make these crystalline patterns. Because the real shocking thing that we found, Steve, is that even in the man-made formations, some that we made ourselves, paying the farmer and making our shapes to see if we could do it, affected our cameras, our batteries, our electronic equipment.
Our frequencies.
The man-made formations affect cameras, batteries, and electronic devices. I've been there when 3 different devices have all failed within a few minutes of the person entering the circle with brand new, fresh batteries.
So maybe it's just a puzzle for us to solve.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle. Like, what is it about a shape in the wheat? I've never been actually able to figure out completely why it's doing this, but it has something to do with symmetrical crystalline-like shapes. There's something about that shape which creates an energy field or traps energy. Maybe it has something to do with dark energy, dark matter, some other energy field that science doesn't really understand very well yet. You know, 96% of the universe, no one knows what it is because it's dark energy or dark matter. Science has no clue what the matter is, what the forces are, but we know it's out there from all the experiments. That somehow these crystalline-like shapes, these symmetrical shapes, which are often very beautiful looking too, have some effect on us and our equipment in ways that science hasn't been able to explain. But I think it has something to do with, you know, superconductivity, this way that electricity and energy can move much more efficiently, much more flow, that science is always working now to try to develop devices because it would reduce the amount of energy consumption. It's almost like these crops become like superconductors. And as soon as your batteries go into them, it's like they're gone because they get very hot very quickly. It's like they discharge. Some people's cameras never worked again. I was there when a friend of mine, Ron Russell, used to give the tours, who lives in this area. I saw his Sony camera stop working as soon as he put it down, camcorder. He sent it back to Sony. They said it had melted. The solder joints had melted inside.
Wow.
And it was switched off. So, you know, it charged him a lot to resolder it. So there's something about it that's real. It's very possible it started as a UFO, something related to flying discs, their propulsion system getting close to the wheat, leaving these swirls. Humans began to imitate it. The ones that I've seen in England recently, I'm convinced, are made by people that I've gotten to know there and other people who I haven't met, circle makers.
Where are most of the sightings at?
Of the
primarily
circles?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
England?
Mostly in England, I would say they happen all over the planet. Here's the interesting thing about it, though. These circle makers, if you start to talk to them, see the strangest phenomena out there when they're making these circles. One of them described to me seeing a triangular craft come over their formation while they're making it. Not a huge one like people saw in Phoenix, maybe something more the size of this room. Others have described seeing balls of light and other luminous phenomena that they can't explain, which all would be consistent with the idea that crop circles are a type of agrarian technology that we've discovered, right? And something's attracted to it. They're actually checking it out, something like that. So it's a really fascinating subject. The fact that people are involved in it makes it even more interesting to me.
Yeah. So I want to move into, how close is your device to you right now? Your own device?
Well, I silenced my cell phone before I came in for the interview, and it's over there, Steve.
It's over there. But normally, how far is it from you?
Oh, normally, like most people, it's just in my pocket. It's right there.
It's close, right? Okay, so I have a tablet here too, and I have this. So I want to talk about this for a second, because what really fascinated me from the last show you and I did is that you talked about unintended consequences,
right?
Which I had a chance to not just to talk about it since then on other shows, but I've been really fascinated by it, and I wanted to see, just dive in it a little bit, what could be happening with technology in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Because I don't know if people, I feel people kind of being the same way about these devices as they are about UFOs and aliens. They're in denial of what these things are. Like, I want to make sure that people, like, really get that there are 2 cameras in here, one in front, one in the back.
Yeah.
and it's connected.
Smile.
And it's connected to the internet. And anything that you say could be actually recorded. And anything that you do on this screen, when you touch it and you on the internet, it could be read and stored and recorded. And I'm not sure that people really pay attention to that necessarily. But what could be let's explore some of the unintended consequences that could come out of somebody or some organization or some corporation on this planet storing this information somewhere and using it for good or for not so good things.
Well, you've raised a lot of issues there. I mean,
Let's take it one at a time.
The issue is
and it's not just a privacy issue anymore.
Who is using the data? How are they using it? Is it a type of kind of surveillance that no one really consented to? The data can be sold. It can identify you. It can identify what you like to do, what you like to watch, what you like to buy. And you're not really aware of this, so you're using this technology all the time, and someone's using it for their own private means. In this case, a private company like Google or something like that. We don't know exactly what they're going to be doing with the data, right? It raises a lot of privacy issues.
Hundreds of millions of, well, not even hundreds of millions of people. We're talking about how many of these devices are out there right
There's
now?
more than people, I think.
More than 7 billion?
In the U.S., there's more cell phones than people. That's the last thing I read. So we know that it's rapidly approaching. We're more than 70%
So let's say billions. We can say billions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Billions of devices out there. And every moment in time and space, there is data that is being collected from these devices.
Yes, 24/7.
What could you do with that data? I mean,
you can do a lot with it. You're talking to someone that
you're a statistician anyway,
you can do a lot with data, and you can do a lot with meta-analysis. We're told that the data doesn't identify you specifically, but there's so many Wi-Fi chips in so many devices that we use. You leave traces. You leave these like electronic breadcrumb trails wherever you go, and it's a question of who and what that can be used for. But that's certainly a big issue. There's another issue, though. You're starting the question, unintended consequences. It's one of my favorite topics. I know yours, too, because, we use these things, and we don't think what
it's like we're not paying attention. Like, I'm not trying to say that I don't like this, because I do. I love my devices because it helps me to do a lot of things. But I'm also thinking, and I think a lot of people maybe have heard this, maybe not, that there's still a company called IBM, and they actually helped the Nazis.
We talked about this last time.
Yeah, they helped the Nazis, and I don't think people are being ignorant about that as well.
It has positive and negative uses. I think we're a little too sanguine about technology and just automatically assume it's evolutionary to have more technology. And this is simply not true. There's a lot of things that you can do fine without needing, electronics to intervene into the system. And look, I still love to play acoustic guitar. You don't need any amplification there to have a good time playing, listening. You can even play for a room of people without any amplification. It hasn't changed in thousands of years.
Right.
But what you're referring to is ways that this technology could be used to control people, to coerce people, to allow oppressive governments to really, have more power than they even would have before because these records exist. And absolutely correct. The first use of the IBM mainframe was by Hitler and the Nazis to keep track of concentration camp inmates. Each of those control cars would be an inmate, and it gave them a very efficient means to commit genocide. And so this is something that we always have to watch out for. We need to be vigilant about the way technologies are used. On the other side, technology can be liberating. It can have a beneficial effect. I mean, think of the next time there's a Phoenix Lights sighting. Back in '97, not as many people had cell phones. The cell phones didn't have cameras in them, at least not very, good ones. Now, the next time that type of sighting happens, in fact, Steve, I'm quite convinced if there is another large UFO event, for lack of a better word, it's going to make even more of an impact. Do you know the Phoenix Lights sighting wasn't reported for 3 months by the New York Times didn't report on it for 3 months after it happened. It happened in March of '97. No one was talking about it. The media was silent. The next time it happens, there's going to be so many photographs, so much video, and people are going to be posting it on Twitter and on their Facebook page and so forth. So I think technology in itself, my answer would be it's fundamentally neutral. It's how we use it. If we use it without being conscious, and your company here is called Conscious Evolution Media, you're encouraging people with your programs here to be more aware, more awake, more conscious of what we're doing. Good point. If we're using it unconsciously, sleepwalking, connected to it all the time, in Opening Minds, I wrote about this extensively. You get this kind of time famine, this nanoculture, where you're just doing a lot of, meaningless stuff, keeping track of all these things that you need to keep track of, and it eats up your time. And it doesn't give you anything useful back. So it's really, I think, which is your point, to be conscious, to be aware of how you're using it. I think it can be used creatively, constructively. We've seen in various places on the planet, it's probably happening right now in Eastern Europe, where people have challenged their government, right? This can be a very effective tool for people to organize themselves. And a lot of people have suggested when you combine this type of technology with 3D printers and other types of technology, it could be very liberating for us to actually create our own products in our home rather than going to centralized market systems. We can actually create our own pieces and products and fix our own devices with our own. This is one possibility for our future. 3D printers that actually combine the power of the internet with creative, productive, commerce. And it'll completely change the landscape if that were to happen.
Well, I'm told, Simeon, that this technology, the government and the Army and the Air Force had this technology 20 years ago. Matter of fact, it seems like, to me, in terms of what I'm hearing, is that commercialization of these things, like there's a 20-year lag, 20, 30-year lag, when the government and the Army and Air Force and all those people get tired of it, then that's when it gets released to the public. And they can be anywhere from 20, 30 to 100 years ahead of what's possible right now.
Yeah,
what do you hear about that?
Yeah, this is what we're hearing.
That's what you're hearing.
Is that, in these black budget programs and so forth, that this technology, what we're getting now, they already had 20 years ago, and it's kind of released to the market with a certain, plan to eventually, commercialize it. I don't know if that's actually, I can't prove it's true. I have talked to people, several, either who worked with one of the aerospace contractors that works with NASA on one of our telescopes, Hubble Space Telescope, things like that, or people whose parents, and there are many people out there, by the way, whose parents worked either in the military, in the government, or in aerospace, who saw things, who later in life, when they realize they're coming to the ends of their physical lives, here want to start talking about it, but they signed security oaths. We'll start talking about this. I've talked to some of those people, and they tell me they have seen technology that is so far advanced of what we have now, they don't know where it came from. It doesn't even look anything remotely like the technology that we have now, and they were told several instances of this. Can you figure out how it worked? It was given to a group of people. In every case, their conclusion was that it would have to be extraterrestrial. It's simply not possible with our state of technology. They were told the people who made it left, we'd like you to figure out how it worked. They never could figure it out. This is what we're told, and this is what I'm told by people whose parents either worked there or who worked themselves. So it definitely seems like there's a layer of technology that we don't have access to. Some of it is, are we developing it? Is it coming from, we've heard reports that from these crash retrievals of unidentified flying objects, to bring it back to this subject, alien space vehicles, whatever you want to call these objects, that there's a level of technology transfer. A lot of people in the UFO truth...
Or backward engineer.
Exactly. Now, this is what motivates a lot of people in the UFO truth movement, if you'd like to call it that, who want to end, if you want to call it a cover-up or a truth embargo, as some people like to call it, is that they believe that this technology is being held by a very limited group of people and it could be advantageous, energy technologies and so forth. I'm not actually in a position whether to say that's literally a fact, but there are a lot of people who've had interviews with people that have worked in these black budget programs. These are programs that are funded by Congress where Congress doesn't find out what they are. The military, the intelligence community says it's too sensitive to tell you what it's about. A lot of people suspect that there's billions of dollars of funding. Some of it is going to reverse engineer some of these retrieved crashes of vehicles. We like to say they're extraterrestrial. We don't actually know where these are from. If they had a tag on the side with a license plate, and this one's from Alpha Centauri, this is from Tau Ceti, we don't know where these are from. You can't rule out the possibility that these are from here, from some civilization that we don't know about, or maybe a parallel dimension. I'm not sure where these are from. These vehicles exist, and they're physical in some levels. Sometimes they actually make mistakes. They're fallible. They crash. There are survivors. We were told, going back to Roswell in '47, there's a great new book by Don Schmidt about witnesses to the Roswell wreckage at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, people who say either they saw the wreckage and live aliens, or their children heard the stories from their dads or moms who worked there, secretaries and so forth. There's many credible witnesses from Wright-Patterson who've said, we've seen the wreckage, the memory metals technology that's far beyond what we had in '47, and have seen the bodies, and in some cases, live aliens. Again, this is why we need some sort of process here to find out the truth about all this. Right. But there is a technological component to it. Yep.
Right. So I just want to share something with you and with the viewers, that when I was 16 years old, I went through a period of about a year where I was completely taken over. My mind was completely taken over by the subject of, and we didn't have any of this technology, the subject of we are being replaced by robots. That humanity, and I was really 16, that humanity is in trouble. And where I went with it, to let this out of myself, is I wrote poems. I wrote like hundreds of poems about what's going to happen to humanity, that we are going to be replaced by machines. And after a year of this, I just dropped it like a hot potato and I never talked about it again. And so where I'm headed with this is, we both know that there are companies right now in this country and other countries that are working on artificial intelligence. And let's just open up a conversation about that, because what's the possibility? Like, what I want to ask you really is, could there be a time in your lifetime, in my lifetime, you're probably younger than me, but let's say in the next, 20 years, 30 years, could it be possible that we can succeed at creating human beings just like you and I, and then we couldn't tell the difference between, is it the real Steve or Simeon, or is it the artificial copy? And is it possible, would it be possible that all of this data that we're collecting right now, that it could be downloaded into these beings, into this artificial intelligence beings? And what I'm saying, I guess, would it be possible to have our soul, our essence, be downloaded into a machine, a computer?
You're getting very deep here, Steve. This is
I want to make sure that if our
Very
viewers are
deep.
interested
This is
in this,
good.
we want to have more conversations like this.
He's good. Yeah, it's a great series of questions there. You've just raised so many questions about the nature of consciousness and intelligence, and who are we? Where are we? And
how are we going to be able to tell the difference if it's the real you or not the real you?
See, because a lot of what we've been talking about today suggests that consciousness is not, as they say, an epiphenomena of material matter. You know, the traditional view that science has had, classical Newtonian Cartesian science has said that you have this physical body here, and somehow the consciousness kind of grafts itself on. We don't know how that happens.
Well, scientists don't know how to talk about that.
They don't, and it's gone nowhere. And the evidence that you and I have talked about, the things like remote viewing phenomena and resonance and the way information moves around without an obvious channel that we can see it, quantum mechanics, new interpretations of quantum mechanics, quantum biology is suggesting this, is that consciousness actually comes before the matter. That this matter, what we see as matter, is condensed information, condensed consciousness. So if that is true, this kind of newer view of consciousness that I think you need to adopt if you're going to explain the data that we've been talking about today, some of the phenomena we've been talking about, there's a lot more, is that it actually is like a permanent sort of source of energy in the universe, that it comes before matter, right? Some people call it idealism, whatever you want to call it. If that were true, then the answer to your question would be yes. You could have other life forms kind of
artificially
emerge.
Made life forms.
Well, this is the thing. Would they be artificial? If consciousness is one of the fundamental components of the universe, if we just play with that argument for a second.
Yeah, it raises the question, what are we? I mean,
very good question. That's why maybe a lot of people are afraid to approach this topic. We're really questioning what we are. And the data from these sort of subjects that we've been talking about today, and I know you like to think about and talk about on a regular basis, suggest we need another scientific model, because it really appears that the scientific models we've had so far can't even come close to explaining this data. You know what they try to do? They try to marginalize it, say, you know, it's a mental disorder, blah, blah. But if you really look at the data, and there's more and more of it every day, it's that these phenomena are real. They're consistently there in all these studies. It suggests another model where consciousness is basically non-local. And if that's true, in other words, it's spread out over the universe, it's not just here in our bodies, it's something that pre-exists, then it wouldn't be artificial, Steve. That's what I'm saying.
A lot of people refer to the source. There is an energy source that you and I come from, and in terms of our consciousness. And people that are not awake yet or not conscious yet don't really know about this. They can't possibly know about it, because in order to be connected to that source, to that energy, you have to be awake and you have to be conscious. Otherwise, I'm trying to say, otherwise you're just a robot.
Well, here's the thing, Steve. This is kind of funny that you're bringing this up. You know, the first thing I wrote down, I remember writing down as a kid, was I decided when I grew up, this is when I was like 5, I wanted to build robots. In fact, I was so convinced I wanted to do this, I made my mom write it down in a book before I could write. I knew I wanted to build robots, in a larger sense, kind of construct intelligent beings. Here's another way to look at your question. Let me answer it this way. I don't think you can ever create consciousness. I think it already exists. And we are part of that. It's like a field.
Oh, everybody, I believe, has it.
Yes, and if that's true, I don't think artificial intelligence will ever work, because a machine doesn't know what it's like to take a walk in the park, to feel sunlight on a spring day. You and I, when we see this, and our entire audience knows what that feels like. I say a day at the beach. It gives you a feeling, right? A machine doesn't know what that's like. It doesn't have a body.
All right, so let me challenge you.
So I don't think it'll ever work.
Let me challenge you about that for a minute. And how I want to challenge you is that there's a group of people right now in Hollywood that somehow seems to be able to make these movies. And there's the iRobot, and there are television shows right now on commercial television as we speak, where they actually toying with this idea. And I don't want to say the name of it, but there's a cop show right now where there's a real cop, you're the real cop, and there's me, I'm the artificial cop, and I actually am experiencing the fact that I'm feeling. I have feelings, and I am becoming conscious. Now, why is it that Hollywood seems to have this license to have access to these kind of information? And it just also so happens, I'm noticing, that as they're releasing these movies, and I can go back 20 years ago, I can go back 30 years ago when we had these science fiction movies, and then everything that they've had, including in these 30-year-old science fiction movies, they had these devices or similar devices that we had no idea about. We didn't even know what the heck it was. We just took it as, okay, so this is just a story from the movie, but guess what? 20 years later, they become real.
Sometimes they become real. Not every single thing.
No, not every single thing,
real,
but
certainly
most of things that I keep seeing.
Who was it? Was it Isaac Asimov or someone who said the science fiction of today is the science of tomorrow? It's just
like the beam me up, Scotty. You know, it hasn't happened yet. But where did
true.
they get that idea?
Well, we in the West, we seem to have this real interest in creating machines that do things for us, finding out more how nature works in this kind of linear, mechanistic way. And when you get to consciousness, I don't think it fits within that mechanistic mold. And that's why I think that there's a limit to what you could actually do. You can't get there without switching the point of view you have on it. It's not simply that you can create a machine and consciousness is going to come into that machine if you put enough transistors. The fantasy that our kind of information age technologists have is if you get the thing operating fast enough and you get enough transistors per square millimeter in there on the chips, right? And you keep adding from single
CPUs.
chips to dual chips to quad chips to this latest Apple Mac Pro that has 12 on them if you go up to that level. And somehow if we get enough there, it will become conscious. I think if you keep putting more processing power in there, you will get to some sort of superconductive communication with the larger universe spontaneously, which will be quite a shock when it happens. I can see how that could happen. But I don't think just adding more chips in there and more speed, like IBM's Deep Blue computer, it may be able to calculate faster and compete with the best chess players on the planet because it's simply mechanistically computing as many moves ahead as it can. And it can basically start thinking faster than the human, and it can get to, I think these computers so far have gotten to draws with the best chess masters.
Yeah, but let me have you pause there. Let me have you pause there for a second. Yeah. Okay, so, and I said this many times, you and I are the most sophisticated computer on this planet. And there's a difference, because just think about it for a second. There's trillions of bits of things that are happening. Just the fact that you looked at me, just the fact that you made a face, just the fact that you're hearing me, just the fact that what had to happen in your body in order for any of these little things to occur?
Well, it's a miracle. It's absolutely incredible. If you break it down, there's trillions of interactions happening each of us per second. And you're not even conscious of it. It's all on autopilot. That's the most amazing thing.
And that there's no computer out there that could actually, right now, that could create what you and I are doing right now.
No, because it's more than information, it's energy. This is the thing, Steve, right? You have energy, I have energy, it's more than just silicon devices exchanging bits of information, it's energy too. And this is why you need a biological structure. If those computers were able to actually have a biological component to them, we might get there. But you know the thing, Steve, we can't even define exactly what life is. I mean, no one's exactly certain anymore how to define it. We had this definition you and I learned in high school. Remember in grade school? They said, well, there were like these 18 conditions for what life is. But it's really...
Today I feel life is consciousness. That's what I feel.
You're right. And if it is consciousness, then it's more than a computer. Here's the funny thing about it. We create these metaphors, and then we define them, want to define everything by that metaphor. And because we live in a society now that has lots of computers, we kind of use that computer metaphor to kind of put everything in. But I don't think you can still explain. But life transcends those metaphors.
But I also feel that consciousness has the only thing that I can come up with or can relate to right now that has unlimited possibility. I can't think, and that's why I cannot do anything else in my life right now, because everything else bores me to death. It's limited. Everything else that I...
Yeah. No, I know what you're getting at. You know, keep thinking about 2001 and HAL. the computer and how it goes.
It's a current movie today.
I don't think it's such a good idea to do that. But that still we would say was a computer, right? It didn't. Was it literally feeling, or was it acting like something that had feelings? That's the difference. And we'll actually only know what. See, we'll have the answer to this question someday when one of these devices is here and we can ask it, right? There's a third party missing here, which is this cyborg that you're thinking about, and we could actually need to get it here and actually ask it some questions. Alan Turing had a test for this. You remember Alan Turing, the mathematician from Great Britain that cracked a lot of the Enigma codes and unfortunately was put in jail for his sexual behavior. Homosexuality was illegal in Britain at the time, but he's the one who allegedly cracked the German codes with his Enigma machine, right? And he had a test for this, which was if you can talk to a computer and you can't distinguish it from a human, that's artificial intelligence. So the day that we can get there and you could actually replace me with a computer, and you had a black curtain here and you couldn't tell the difference between the simian and the holographic version, according to Turing, that would be artificial intelligence. I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Yeah, not yet, but I think.
But if you couldn't tell the difference, that was his view of definition of real artificial intelligence.
Yeah. Here we go. Another conscious hour that just goes bye-bye. It feels like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, just like this started. It's been a lot of fun.
I really enjoyed the conversation. It was fantastic. Hopefully we can continue it in the near future. So if any one of you has got in touch, moved, and inspired by anything Simeon said or I said or what we discussed, and you want more of it, go to our website at consciousevolutionmedia.com and let us know about it. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Steve.
Simeon, I
Thanks
really
for
appreciate
our crew here.
And see you guys on the next edition of
See you next time.
our show. Thank you.